The Cognitive-Theoretic Model of the Universe, or the C.T.M.U. by Christopher Langan. So if you are unfamiliar with Christopher Langan is an American rogue scholar, you might say, who is noted for having a very, very, very high IQ. In fact, I believe his IQ has been gauged to be somewhere between 195 and 200. If so, that would make him probably not only the smartest person alive now, but possibly the smartest person to have ever lived, or certainly among the smartest people to have ever lived, certainly. But despite such a remarkable mental capacity, Christopher Langan is not, as you may have expected, an academic. No, he has worked a number of jobs over the years, I believe, a number of blue-collar jobs, actually, most notably perhaps being a bar bouncer in Long Island, I believe. The work and research which he has pursued over the years has been pretty much independent, I believe. But despite not being an academic, the breadth of his erudition is on full display in this work, the Cognitive-Theoretic Model of the Universe, which is his main work, I believe. It is a fusion of physics and metaphysics, and it is, as it is subtitled, a type of reality theory, or you might say a theory of everything, which seeks to explain pretty much life, the universe, and everything. And it is, without a shadow of a doubt, the hardest thing I have ever read in my life. Now, I like to think that I've read some fairly difficult works out there. I've read Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. I've read Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. And I thought those were hard at the time, but oh no. Kant and Wittgenstein are like Dr. Seuss compared to this. This is, bar none, the most difficult thing I have ever read in my life. In fact, to say that I read it is to say that, like, my eyes absorbed the words on the paper, but the meaning of those words is a different matter altogether. I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of this that went right over my head. I don't know what my own IQ is exactly, but I'm a wager that it's probably not 200. And so reading this is probably me reaching beyond my grasp a little bit. But nevertheless, I'm always curious with stuff like this, with people who claim to have figured it all out, so to speak. And I have to say, even though there is a lot of this that I did not grasp, there were snatches that I was able to kind of latch onto. There was enough that I was able to, or at least that I think I was able to, tenuously begin to comprehend, that I was impressed, to say the least. This is not only the most difficult thing I've ever read, but it may be the most incredible thing I've ever read as well, because it truly, not only did it bake my little noodle, but the claims that it makes and the fact that it may actually just live up to those claims and accomplish them is honestly staggering. This is truly, again, not only the hardest thing I've ever read, but it may be the most incredible that I've ever read. And it's only 83 pages long. In 83 brief pages, Mr. Langan is able to formulate a theory of reality which explains everything, kind of. And it is truly something to behold. So this is probably above my pay grade, so to speak, to even try to expound upon this work. But that's never stopped me before, and I'm going to do it again. So join me, won't you, as I do my damnedest to explicate Christopher Langan's The Cognitive-Theoretic Model of the Universe. So this is probably going to be very scattershot and unfocused, because not only am I still reeling after having read this, but I don't really know exactly how best to go about trying to put into my own words what I was able to grasp of the words in this little book, because it covers some serious territory. But I'll just give it my best shot, so bear with me if you will. So, the cognitive-theoretic model of the universe, or the CTMU, is a theory of reality, or kind of a theory of everything, if you will, which seeks to basically just explain life, the universe, and everything, I guess. So, to begin with, Langan utilizes a lot of logic in this. In that respect, it actually was kind of reminiscent of reading Wittgenstein's Tractatus, because that is obviously very logic intensive. And this is no exception. It uses quite a bit of logic, and in particular, he actually says that at base, Aristotle was right that two-value logic is what the universe functions with. You know, there are other forms of logic, such as fuzzy logic, where things don't necessarily have to be fully true or fully false. But for the purposes of his work here, Mr. Langan seems to endorse the classic Aristotelian two-value logic of yes, no, true, false, real, unreal. But to begin with, he says that the universe is tautological in nature. That is, that the universe is super tautological in nature. So, in the normal rules of logic, a tautology is a meaningless statement, because it is a statement that can only be true. It cannot be tested. It is only true. It can only have one value, which is true. So, for that reason, tautologies are not really regarded as useful statements. But Langan here takes a different tack and says that everything, the universe, reality itself, is not only tautological, but super tautological. By that, he means I think. And I want to just preface everything I'm going to say in this. I just want to addend a little I think to this. I want to attach a little I think to everything, because, again, I don't know exactly how much I'm getting right, but I'm just giving it my best shot. So, what I think that Langan means by this is that reality exists and operates by certain self-evident and self-justifying principles, which can't really be tried; they can only be accepted. It's kind of like in the Bible, right? In the book of Exodus, when Moses is standing before the burning bush, and he asks God to identify himself. He says, "How shall I identify you? Who shall I say sent me?" And of course, God's reply is, "I am that I am." And that's kind of the same thing here, that I am that I am. That's all the justification you're going to get, because that's all the justification you can get. I am that I am. The universe exists and functions tautologically by certain self-evident, self-justifying principles, which, again, can't be really tried. They can only be accepted. But beyond this, Langan says that the universe is not only self-justifying, but self-generating. Now, it has long been a kind of philosophical dichotomy when it comes to cosmology, whether the universe sprang from nothing or was the creation of a prior cause. And both of these things are attended by certain issues. If you believe that the universe was caused, that there is a cause for every effect, and that the universe itself is just an effect, well, then you have kind of the infinite regress of what caused the universe and what caused that cause, and so on and so forth. And again, that is the problems there are kind of obvious. But conversely, if you think that the universe was not caused, that it just sprang into existence from nothing, then you also have to say, how can that be? How can something come from nothing? And Langan's solution here is to say that the universe created itself. The universe caused itself, because the universe is self-generating. And he says that the universe generates itself through a process of potentialization and actualization, which is accomplished through what he calls telic recursion. And again, there is so much terminology in this that is, I think, invented. So that makes comprehension that much more difficult. But anyway, The process of telic recursion is an atemporal process by which the universe potentializes itself and actualizes itself by selecting between certain outcomes to certain events from the future backwards, I believe, again, atemporally. So that is the way that the universe evolves itself through telic recursion, at least in the book's terminology. And this is accomplished using what Langan denotes as SCSPL, or self-configuring, self-processing language. Now, one of the most fascinating aspects of the cognitive theoretic model of the universe is that Langan really highlights the fundamental link between language and reality. In fact, as Langan says, reality itself is a language. That the way that the universe creates itself and evolves itself and manifests itself is through a conversation with itself. That language and reality are fundamentally linked. They are inextricable. And also, this brings kind of to refer back to Wittgenstein's Tractatus. The Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus ends with the well-known phrase, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." Now, Langan goes further and says, "Whereof one cannot speak, nothing exists to be spoken of." And what's so interesting about this is that Langan points out that anything which is not describable by language is not real. That, again, because language and reality, the map and the territory, are so fundamentally linked and entwined with each other, and that because reality is itself a form of language, anything which cannot be described is fundamentally not real. And also, reality is all-encompassing, if you will, that reality contains everything within it and nothing can exist outside of it. And again, that's kind of tautological in nature, I suppose, but it's very fascinating to see what he does with this information. And he also goes into the notion of syndipionesis, which again, I believe that is an invented term, or at least I've never seen that word before in my life. But that is kind of a way of saying the difference in sameness. It's kind of harkening back, sort of, perhaps unwittingly, to that old adage by, I believe it was Heraclitus, the unity of opposites, that everything, no matter how opposite one thing may seem to another, they are fundamentally the same because they are contained within the same medium. That reality is the medium that contains everything, and no matter how different anything may be, they are fundamentally the same on a basic level because they exist within the same medium. Otherwise, they could not be contrasted or compared at all. The syntax that we use to analyze and contrast things, such as apples and oranges, perhaps, evinces a certain fundamental unity, even though things are different from each other. That reality is all encompassing. Nothing can exist outside of reality. Nothing can exist outside of description. And that the universe fundamentally is intelligent in a way. And this is, again, one of the most fascinating aspects of the CTMU, is that it may just prove God. That's one of the oldest and most perennially discussed issues in philosophy and theology, the existence of God. But dang if Langan here didn't perhaps prove God within the framework of his thing anyway. So Langan says that the universe began in a state of unbound telesis, or a state of limitless potential. And that first there is disorder, and that from disorder there comes order. Now, the way in which Langan says that order comes about from disorder and the universe structures itself and evolves is through the universe talking to itself, speaking itself into existence, because reality is fundamentally kind of a language of itself. That all of existence is the universe speaking itself into existence and then conversing with itself and evolving itself. In other words, in the beginning was the Word, right? The Logos, I guess, is another way that you could put this. That there fundamentally is an inherently intelligent quality to the universe by which it evolves and shapes itself. That's about all I can say about the cognitive theoretic model of the universe. Again, there is so much of this. In fact, there are places in the middle of this where it's literally like reading another language. I read the words, but the words didn't always make sense to me. But I feel as though I was able to, again, at least tenuously grasp enough to get the basic concepts, the baseline things that Langan is trying to say here. And I was impressed with what I read here because um, it is quite rigorous in its presentation. And because it relies so much on tautology, it is kind of self justifying in its own right. And that's um, possibly perhaps why this doesn't have more academic acceptance um, than it does, because Langan uh, is not an academic, and again, he's kind of an independent rogue scholar type. Uh, but perhaps uh, a large part of the reason why this is not accepted in the mainstream as much as it might be is because it relies so much on tautological argumentation. And again, normally tautologies are regarded as meaningless, but Langan kind of bases his whole theory on things that events themselves, sort of. The CTMU also is not accepted in the mainstream because partly of its demanding and at times bewildering terminology. Phrases such as telic recursion and words such as syndiphonesis, you may not be able to find those things in a dictionary. Uh, and one of the major criticisms of this that I've come across is that some people say that it's basically just intelligent design buried under a mountain of word salad. And while I readily confess to not understanding all of this or even most of this, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and stand up and say this is absolutely not word salad. I do not think that what Langan is doing here is obfuscatory and obfuscatory in nature. I don't think that's the case. This is hard to understand because Langan is really going for it. He's trying to do the ultimate thing here. He's trying to explain literally everything in a very brief page count. But the fact is that you would be hard pressed to do that in a way that's not incomprehensible to the average eye. But I don't think this is word salad at all. I think this is, again, I don't think this is the hardest thing I have ever read in my life, but I don't think it's word salad. I think he is saying exactly what he means. It's just that the way that it has to be said is quite demanding, and I think there's a lot of valuable stuff here. Um, I don't rate works like this generally. I mean, how would you even rate this? I can't even understand all of this. Again, I'm just going to forego rating this as I usually do with works such as this. But I will say this is truly one of the most incredible things. It may be the most incredible thing I've ever read in my life. And I don't even probably understand a fraction of it. But what I did get out of it was such that I was truly astounded by it. It is truly a theory of everything. And I would like to kind of wrap up and end, I suppose, with reading an excerpt out of it from the final section because it just kind of leaped out at me, and this is not terribly hard to digest. This is actually one of the more understandable things that Langan has to say in this, but I'd like to read it because I think it's kind of profound. The CTMU has a meta-Darwinian message. The universe evolves by hological self-replication and self-selection. If you don't know what hology is, you're going to have to read the book. Furthermore, because the universe is natural, its self-selection amounts to a cosmic form of natural selection. But by the nature of this selection process, it also bears description as intelligent self-design. The universe is intelligent because this is precisely what it must be in order to solve the problem of self-selection, the master problem in terms of which all lesser problems are necessarily formulated. This is unsurprising, for intelligence itself is a natural phenomenon that could never have emerged in humans and animals were it not already a latent property of the medium of emergence. An object does not displace its medium but embodies it and thus serves as an expression of its underlying syntactic properties. That really jumped out at me because one of the oldest problems in like philosophy of mind and study of consciousness and intelligence is how do these things arise when they don't seem to be contained in the materials which they ultimately arise from? And the answer is they are. The consciousness and intelligence cannot arise from things that don't already possess the latent potential for those things already. Now, this is also where you can go off into arguments for panpsychism, and there is kind of a panpsychic element to the CTMU, but that passage there just really leaps out at me because there you can do a little logical deducing there and say that perhaps, as Langan avers in this, the universe fundamentally is itself intelligent. In fact, one of the major sections in this book, one of the major aspects of the CTMU is the M equals R principle, or the mind equals reality principle, that reality is fundamentally mental. Language is mental, and reality is itself a language, as Langan explicates in this work. And this is hardly new. In fact, the funny thing about the CTMU is that the components which make up the CTMU are not in and of themselves anything new. For one, he rips a lot from John Wheeler, including the participatory universe and the self-excited circuit concepts. But he also, again, kind of draws on panpsychism a little bit. And I was kind of reminded as well of like Spinoza's argumentation for God, because Spinoza perhaps is the philosopher who came closest, or perhaps did prove the existence of God, if only because his definition of God is so different from the standard definition. But I was reminded of that and the unity of opposites kind of thing, like from Heraclitus, I believe. The components that make up the CTMU are not in and of themselves anything particularly new, but rather it's the way that they're put together, the way that they're synthesized into this truly staggering framework, which, again, even though so much of it I did not understand properly, if at all, so much of it went over my head, what I was able to get out of it nonetheless has impacted me quite profoundly. It has. In fact, I want to reiterate, this is possibly the most incredible thing I've ever read. And so I would like to say this, Mr. Langan, if you ever come across this video, if you ever see this, I just want to commend you for what you've done with the CTMU. I know that it's not so accepted in the academic mainstream, but who the hell cares? Truth is truth, and I think there is a lot of truth in this. And again, because it's so tautological in nature, it's also unfalsifiable. But then again, I am that I am. The universe is self-evidently itself, right? I mean, again, I told you this was going to be scattershot and unfocused, but I think that this is truly magnificent. And I didn't even grasp, again, probably even a fraction of it. But Mr. Langan, if you do ever see this, hats off to you, sir, because this truly rocked my world. It's not only the most challenging thing I've ever read, it once again may be the most incredible thing I've ever read as well. So salute. But anyway, so that has been my pitiful, probably attempt at summarizing and analyzing Christopher Langan's The Cognitive-Theoretic Model of the Universe, or the CTMU. This is I, this is punching the heavy bag right here for me. This is reaching probably way beyond my grasp, but it's such a fascinating work. It really is. And again, I'm not going to rate it because how would you even rate this? But I will say this: I'm so glad that I read this, even though I probably didn't get much of it. I'm still glad that I read it because what I did get has uh, profoundly impacted me, and I think it is an incredible work. Even though I'm probably not all that qualified to discourse on it. But yeah, the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe by Christopher Langan. Have you read the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, or the CTMU? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. Whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said here today. And if you haven't read the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, I really would like to recommend this just because I think it's so amazing. But I also have to add the disclaimer, the probably totally unnecessary disclaimer, that this is not easy going. This is definitely not beach reading. It's very, very demanding, and at times can seem just absolutely impenetrable. But I will say this, for those who are up to the challenge, those out there who are interested in philosophy, or physics, or just life, the universe, and everything, I absolutely would recommend picking this up. I think it is, once more, just truly an incredible work that may just live up to its own hype. And I'm so thankful I read it. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.